If you've been thinking about wanting to start a podcast but not sure where to get started, I have some news for you. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast as well with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hi gang, Donna here. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Evelyn LaTorre. Evelyn holds a doctorate in multicultural education from the University of San Francisco and a master's degree in social welfare from UC Berkeley. She's worked as a bilingual school psychologist and school administrator for 32 years in the public education system in California until her retirement in 2002. She and her Peruvian husband had been married since 1966 and have traveled close to 100 countries. She's an author of the award-winning Between Inca Walls, a Peace Corps Memoir, and her second book, Love in the Language, a memoir of cross-cultural marriage, comes out in September of this year. Today's Better To moment takes us back to her finishing serving in the Peace Corps in the Andes in Peru. She was 24 and pregnant by a handsome but penniless university student. So welcome, Evelyn, to the podcast, and thank you for joining us. It sounds like you have a very interesting and romantic adventure to share.
Well, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. And yes, it still is thrilling when I think about it, and especially writing about it, I get to relive it. And usually when you write something, you edit and re-edit, so I get to relive and relive. Some parts aren't that enjoyable, but it's a coming of age story. So I find it it explains a lot to me about me.
That's usually what happens when you're writing. You tend to start learning things about yourself that you didn't realize. Right. So you were 24. Let's go here first. What made you decide to join the Peace Corps?
Well, I had grown up in Montana and had started exploring on my own the countryside, just going up hills and out in the country from the time I was 6. And then when we moved from Montana to California when I was 16, I noticed I got to know a lot of people of different ethnicities. And then in college, I spent weekends during my junior year working with Cesar Chavez. He was taking what do you call it? He was working among the migrants, and he was taking a census. Okay. And so I would go door to door with him. And I loved that culture. I just loved the Latin culture. And so I spent a summer between my junior and senior years of college in a small Mexican town. It's in the book, Paseo El Grande, where with a group of other women, I helped start a school and a library. And so the next best step, a logical step, was to join the Peace Corps, which had started in 1961. And this was 1964. So I was in the early days of the Peace Corps, and it just suited me fine. And I was delighted when I was assigned to Peru, which is another story as to how that happened, just serendipity, really. And then even happier when I was assigned to the Andes area of Peru, because it's very historical. And I knew I'd have a lot of adventures, which is what I wanted for my life.
Yeah. Was your family okay with you doing this?
You know, I was the oldest of 6, and I don't know. It just seems to me when I think back on it, they were just so busy. Everybody was so busy that they didn't, I was lucky in some ways that I had kind of been emancipated early in my life, which allowed me to find out who I was and what I wanted. And for example, my father wanted me to have a Catholic education. And so he sent me 60 miles away. I had to live away from home. I lived in apartments with a roommate usually. And I was on my own a lot from the age of 14. And even before that, I worked summers and on ranches, and was out away from my family. And I think it just gave me an opportunity to discover so many things about life and myself. And so when I went away, I don't know that they never opposed me
Yeah.
outright. I think there was some concern, but I think maybe they trusted that I would just find my way like I always had. I
Yeah.
don't even know if they knew all the ways I was learning about things.
Most likely not. I mean, if you're out on your own at that age, most likely not.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely was not overly protected unless you count how strict my parents were about living up to the Ten Commandments and going to church every Sunday. And I mean, I was raised in a very conservative Catholic family, always warned about sex and a lot of other things. But I didn't really mingle that much with the other kids in my small town. I grew up in a very small town of about 200 in southwestern Montana. And I was just talking to my husband today about how we had a lot of bullies, and they would do things like steal my bike and broke the handlebars. And I could think of a lot of things that happened. And as a kid, you just think that's what life is like, and you learn to deal with it.
Right.
And of course, I always had the support of my parents. They always backed me up, and they wanted me to do well in school. And so, I was living up to some of their expectations that way.
As long as you met some expectations, usually parents are like, "All right, we'll give you a pass on the rest," most of the time.
Well, I do remember one incident where I was with some other girls, and I think I was trying to fit in, and they used to pick cigarette butts out of the gutters and
Oh.
smoke them, and they invited me to join them. Well, of course, I wanted to be one of them. I mean, I probably was 11 then, or
Hmm.
12, I don't know. And my younger brother saw us smoking, and he went home and tattled. And my parents didn't spank us, but they let me know that was not what I needed to do.
Yeah, I imagine. I imagine so. So now that let's go back to the Peace Corps. So you're in the Peace Corps, and you're doing a lot, and you're dare I say, initiating change for some, growth for some. That had to be very rewarding to do that, was it not?
Well, I thought it was. I was really brought up with a real work ethic. My mother, especially, always we needed to be doing something useful. And so when the Peace Corps didn't assign myself and my roommate Marie to a specific town, even, and we found our own placement, which is why my story ends up the way it does. I mean, it was just pure luck or serendipity or fortune or something. And so we started looking for things that might be useful. And we lived in a house behind the education department. So the head people of the regional education department and the man who had invited us to come to Abancay, who turned out to be my future father-in-law, they would decide, or they would suggest things that we would do. And we turned down things like teaching in middle class schools, because we thought, well, they have their own teachers, we
Mhm.
don't want to replace anybody. We also were invited, and we did do it for a little while, teach English in the evening to any adults or students who wanted to. But then we said, well, they're going to forget what we teach them as soon as we leave. They need some way to keep doing it. So I could go through all the things we entertain doing. And so I had been in the 4-H club in Montana. And so when it was suggested by another group, the agricultural group, that we have 4-H clubs, that's what we ended up doing, because we thought we might influence the young girls and help them gain confidence in themselves.
Which I imagine, to them that they were very thankful for.
I think it was enjoyable for them. We used to cook with them. There's an incident in between Inca Walls where we trained the president of our girls' club to give a demonstration, which is what we used to do. Ironically enough, when I was in the Busy Bees 4-H club in Ismay, Montana, I gave my demonstration on hand washing, which has come in very handy the last year. The
Imagine
right way
so.
to wash your hands. Oh yeah, long time, spend a lot of time washing your hands and all that. But so I knew about demonstrations, and we trained her to make potato pancakes, because in Peru there are like 3,000 types of potatoes, and they grew them up on top of the mountains, and they tend to freeze dry them, and that's a
Really?
very subsistence. Yeah, the town we were supposed to move to. Well, that's kind of, I'll talk about that later. But anyway, this girl Paulina won the regional competition, and we think partly it was she really got good. We had her practice over and over again in front of different groups, and she gained confidence. That was really very rewarding. When you ask about what was rewarding, seeing her grow and become confident in being able to speak in front of a group. But the secret ingredient to this particular recipe was beer. And I think it won over the judges, besides the fact that she did a great job.
Yeah.
And we gave them samples afterwards, and it was potato pancakes. They're delicious. So
Of course, of course. It's funny because somebody on TikTok was going through an old cookbook from like the Depression era, and he came across this recipe for potato candy. And it does, yeah, it was kind of like, but he always makes these recipes. He takes these old recipe books and goes through. He said it was actually really good, but it sounded gnarly when he was making it. But it was like, I forgot how much powdered sugar, but it was like mainly powdered sugar and peanut butter. So that's why it was good.
Yeah, right. Well, see, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, originally, we were trained in community development, rural community development, and there was a group that we were supposed to work with. And I've learned since then, I didn't know this the 2 years we were there. The reason we didn't work with them is that it was going to be funded. It was Cooperación Popular was the name of the group. And we were supposed to be sent to rural communities to help bring the indigenous population into the Peruvian population. Over 80% of Peru's population is of indigenous, are from the Incas, and they're mixed with Spaniards. But the native population grows potatoes up in the high Andes, 16,000 feet. Well, maybe not always that high, but around us it was 14,000 feet. And they grow the potatoes there. And then, like I said, they freeze dry them. And we were originally supposed to work with this group and be sent to help a town, Pampa, come down to the road where they could get medical attention, and the government would work with them. And a town was supposed to be built, the town of Suncho. Well, we waited and waited, and we trained for 4 months in the local hospital, thinking, well, mostly what we'll be called upon to do will be medical first aid things, and the town never was built. I think the people preferred staying up in the mountaintops and just doing what they'd always done. I don't think they saw much incentive to come down. To this day, I don't believe the town has ever been built. So
wow.
So that's otherwise. But and the reason that we didn't work with that Cooperación Popular is the funding from the United States was cut off. It had something to do with Robert Kennedy and President Johnson at the time. And another friend of mine is writing a book. He's investigated that. Robert Kennedy did come to the area. I didn't go see him. Friends of mine did. And there was a lot written in the newspapers about his visit. And it had something to do either before or after the funding. It has my not working with Cooperación Popular had something to do with lack of funding. Let me just put it that way.
Maybe, and as you were saying about serendipity and stuff, things wouldn't have played out in your life had you done that.
Probably. I think you're right. I would not have stayed in Abancay. And in retrospect, it was very naive of us to think that we could do much without knowing the Quechua language. My husband speaks Quechua, and in fact, just now even he studies Quechua, and it's the native language. And in the book, we tried to teach groups of children PE, because we did agree to teach in a poorer school, not in the middle class school. And they wanted us to teach PE. And in the beginning, we had a difficult time because the kids didn't understand our directions because we weren't speaking to them in their native language. And had we gone out to this little village to help develop it, it would have been all Quechua. No doubt we would have learned it. I mean, I
Yeah.
became fluent in Spanish, but I don't know how much good we would have done. We were really very idealistic, as were a lot of Peace Corps people. And most of the Peace Corps people who've come back, there are 235,000 of us now that have come back, and we usually say we got more out of it than we gave, although that we have made differences in various countries. And in later years, the Peace Corps tended to be more organized and put you with another person that you would work with someone, and they made sure that there were jobs that we would do. But still, I think it's mostly idealistic recent college graduates that go into the Peace Corps even now.
Well, you got to think about back, let's go back to that time when things were presented in the movies. Everybody speaks English. There's not a language barrier. Everybody speaks English and everybody gets along. And, that was very much the way things were presented to us. So.
Even now, they're only, I think, 18%, maybe it's, I don't know. Not very many Americans have passports. So there aren't very many Americans that know about other countries other than what they see in the movies.
I just got mine last year. I haven't been able to use it, of course, but yes, get the passport during COVID and go nowhere.
Yeah, congratulations. Good. Well, pretty soon you'll be able to.
Yeah. So let's take you back to, so you're 24. How did you meet your husband?
Well, as I was saying, we got to Cusco. I didn't actually say this part. We got to Cusco, which is the capital of the Incas and near Machu Picchu. And that was the regional office of the Peace Corps there. And the regional director didn't know our group was coming in, and he didn't have places to put us. And one by one, over the next couple of weeks, everybody got placed except Marie and I. And he suggested a couple places that we could go. And so we went together to look at a place that was high up on a mountain. Nice place. It took us 2 days to get there practically. I go into how the last part of the trip, there were no roads. So we had to get horses, and it took us, I don't know, hours by horse to get up to the little town. We were all set to we were going to raise chickens and do other things. When somebody happened, a native there, we were having lunch with them, and they happened to mention, oh yeah, in the winter, the rain runs down that trail so that nobody can go down the trail. And then we started to think, well, what if we had appendicitis, or what if something medical, we needed something medical. So we were brave, but we weren't that brave. And there was a Peace Corps rule that said that you weren't supposed to be more than, I think, 8 hours away from medical help. And we definitely would have been. And so we went back, and we were getting ready to still go out there because we wanted to work. And another volunteer who was about to leave said, well, there's this guy, Senor Eguiluz, who's been coming into town. And for 2 years, he's been asking for volunteers to go out to this place called Amancay. And he said, I just saw him in town. And I said, oh, well, let's talk to him. So he introduced us to him, and Senor Eguiluz described this place that was in a lovely valley of 7,000 feet, not at 14,000 feet. And it was like a Shangri-La. He said there were flowers and, a beautiful lake, and surrounded by, snow-capped mountains and all of that. And so our director said, well, you can go out there and take a look at it. We said, no, we don't need to go out and look at it. We'll go there sight unseen, because it sounded so much better. So the only thing we had to do is we wanted to have a washboard made so that we could wash our clothes, because we had to do it by hand. So when our washboard was ready, and there weren't washboards in the stores, a friend of ours drew out what it would look like. We took it to a carpenter, and he put together a washboard. When it was ready, we gathered a bunch of stuff, and we went out there. So it was Senor Eguiluz who then a few months later, we saw him back in Cusco and we said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm here to get my 19-year-old son." And we thought, oh, well, at that time I was 21 and I thought, that 19, he's kind of a bit young. Well, turned out he was my same age. Adolfo Aguiluz was his stepfather, and his mother knew how old he was. And he was home for the summer. Now their summer vacations are like December, January, February, and then they go back to school. So we got there in October of 64. And then in January of 65, Antonio came home to Abancay, and that's where I met him. And I don't know if I believe in love at first sight, but there was certainly an attraction at first sight.
I was going to ask you, was it love at first sight? And you...
No, but I saw him giving me the eye, but he was never very assertive, still isn't. And so I asked they had a girl helper. And after several, and Antonio's mother used to invite us down for lunch all the time. She was a really good cook. And so I don't know, about the fourth or fifth time, I thought, I really want to get to know him better individually, not just sitting around the table. So I gave the Bricky, the helper girl that waited on the table, I gave her a note to give to him when I left, and it said, "Meet me over by some trees."
Nice.
And so he did, and then we just, but it took like a year and a half before we decided we would, make it permanent.
But it's still, sometimes going slow is better, because then you get to know the person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the same things that I didn't like about him then are still true, but I've adjusted and decided that they are to my benefit. I have a second book coming out in September called Love in Any Language, and it's about being married to someone from another culture for 55 years now.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. And I give several examples where I drove in the fast lane, he drove in the slow lane, but it was good for me. I needed to be slowed down and really think about things and feel. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, it's worked out.
So in when we were talking about setting this up, you had said that you found yourself pregnant. So I take it that things progressed in this relationship to a more physical level, and one thing led to another. And
well, not until the very end. And the game of Monopoly has a great deal to do with that. And I'll just leave that there. I have a chapter called Chance Card. And I hadn't, those are the kinds of things that hit you as you're writing. I thought, oh my gosh, it's the game of Monopoly that's responsible for our first son. But things did get physical, although most of the time I knew him, I kept saying, you can convince my mind, but not you can convince my body, but not my mind. Because I had been steeped in, no sex before marriage, which nowadays sounds really provincial, I guess. I don't know. It's just so unusual. And even getting pregnant before you were married. When I was in high school, there were 3 girls that got pregnant about the same time. And boy, their parents had them married to the guys in, within a month. It was a big scandal whenever that happened. And my very, Catholic parents would not have approved at all. And in fact, when I came back from the Peace Corps, I was probably 3 or 4 months pregnant. Now, well, let's see, April, May, June. Yeah, I was several months pregnant, and I couldn't tell them. I could not tell them.
How did they find out?
Well, that is an interesting chapter in Love in Any Language. My mother in particular, I called her the day our son was born, and her first question was, well, was he premature? And then I said, no. And then, that's, they were very supportive afterwards, but I had broken a cardinal rule. And in fact, the day she passed away a couple of years ago, my mother said that my sisters, I have 3 sisters, that any deviations they had were my fault because I gave a bad example. So, but like I was saying earlier, I really believed in myself. So my parents, their opinions, I listened to them, but I got to know myself, and this is one of the things I think it was probably a very good thing that it happened this way, because had I not been pregnant, I did not plan to stay in Peru. And I didn't realize how much in love with me my husband was. I mean, he was my boyfriend, and I had never experienced a love like that. I didn't know what love was.
Yeah.
And so I, was going to go traveling, and then I was going to go to graduate school, and I had all these plans for my life. And the pregnancy, well, it practically it put a stop to that. But there's a letter that I wrote, and I keep all these little things, which is how I know what I should put in or what I can put in the memoir. I had written a letter to Antonio, telling him we didn't know I was pregnant until I was a few days ready to fly home from Lima, because the Peace Corps has you do what I forget what it's called, where you debrief. I'll call it a debriefing after you've been in, and you write reports and all that. And I had to see an obstetrician in Lima, and that's where I got the news. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. And that's a traumatic. I didn't realize until I read my journal that actually had been quite traumatic. I had pushed it out of my mind, I think. But in it, in the letter, I write, "So yes, I am pregnant with your child." And then I put, "P.S. I think I'm still going to go travel around South America with the rest of the people." So that shows, 24-year-old, I was still idealistic, I guess, and dreaming, but I didn't end up doing that. And it was good. I think it was better that I did it that way, because since then, my husband and I now have traveled all over, including the places where I would have gone, right after the Peace Corps, but we've gone together, and it's just so much more meaningful than if I had done it at 24, I think.
Well, that's what I was going to say. At least now you had a partner to share it with. You have somebody to look back and go, "You remember when we did this?" So that's a definite benefit than just traveling by yourself. Because are you still friends with any of your Peace Corps people that you work?
Oh yeah, no, Marie and I communicate all the time. Since I wrote the book, a lot of them, I've heard from a lot of them. They were interested in the book because some of them are in it. A lot of them don't remember the details. It's really interesting how people say they don't remember the details. And I would not have, had I not written in a journal every day. And now the second book that covers from when I left the Peace Corps to about 2000. And I did not keep journals during that time, but I had Christmas card letters that I wrote every year to people, and I kept copies. So I looked at those to see what were the highlights of every year. So I was able to write from that. And then I do write about my children, and I had baby books for that. So I highly encourage people to write a memoir, even if you just keep it for yourself, because it just explains so much of who you are and how you got where you are. And unless it's super traumatic, then you have to be careful, maybe you need to be seeing a therapist at the same time. I think it's very cathartic, very therapeutic. I find it very therapeutic to do that.
Oh, it is. I write fiction, and it bleeds in. It bleeds into the characters. It's part of who you are. When you're writing fiction or writing a memoir, the characters are still part of you. Even if they're fictional, there's still a little bit of you in each one of them. Go ahead.
Yeah, even if it's fiction and they say write what you write what you know into the ideas that you come up with, the part that is not true but could be true.
Yeah, and then I take it a whole nother step up to another level that's much more twisted sometimes. So so How did he react when you told him you were pregnant?
Well, that's kind of like the highlight, or I would, there's an arc even to memoirs, or you have to find the arc.
Well, I won't. If you can't answer, I understand. I can.
Yeah, I mean, let me just say, I had plane tickets and was ready to get on the plane. And again, chance just happened. I mean, partly because the phone lines in Peru were not that good. We didn't have cell phones in those days. And I would call home once in a while on a ham radio that some priests had. But no, there wasn't regular communication even within Peru from
Yeah.
Cusco, between Cusco and Lima. So he didn't call me when I was in Lima, but there are some very surprising ways, and that's kind of the climax of the whole thing. It's serendipity.
Serendipity is an amazing thing. It really is. I mean, I don't think we fully think about those things when, either some people will chalk it up to coincidence or, just happening to be in the right place at the right time. However you look at it, I was talking to a neuroscientist a couple of weeks ago, and it's all about, we're all connected, whether we want to admit it or not. There's the connection between all of us. And if you think about somebody and suddenly they call, then it's because you're connected and you know that. I mean, my husband and I, we were so connected that I could feel his pain. And I would be like, man, my knee is hurting. He's like, yeah, my knee is hurting. As soon as he said it, mine went away. I was like, okay. So
no, that's so true. Another thing that I had studied genetics in college, and I like to rationalize a lot of things. And so thinking about marrying somebody from a foreign country, even though my mother was writing me letters saying, now, you have to live where the husband wants to live. And have you thought this through? You haven't been home for a couple of years. And that was all true. But I forget what I started off to say.
Anyway. We were talking about, you were talking about your mom writing letters, but that brings up a good question though. Did you stay in Peru and have the baby, or did you come back to America?
Well, again, that's kind of a cliffhanger, because all the time my husband wanted me to stay in Peru, but he was a university student. He had no way to support us. I did love Peru. My second book starts out with, I did love Peru, but I couldn't see, I mean, I could do a lot of things, but I didn't see myself being able to adjust to life there with a new baby. And I knew how things worked in the United States, and I did want more education. I wanted to go to graduate school, and Antonio has always been big on education. And so he thought, his natural father, his biological father, actually lived in Ohio.
Okay.
And we would write letters to him. He wasn't very involved with Antonio and never had been. He had gotten Antonio's mother pregnant when she was 16. She was Miss Cusco, very beautiful. And for some reason, probably because his biological grandfather was a lawyer in Lima, they whisked their son away and didn't want them to marry. But there was a connection. Occasionally his biological father would contribute a little bit of money, but he mainly was raised by his grandparents and his mother, which I thought was a liability. My major in college was psychology and sociology. And I remember I was started to say I had studied genetics, and I had learned that genes from two very different populations, there isn't as much risk of, dreaded diseases and the genes, and so that was my rationale that was a good idea. I didn't think like my mother that wouldn't be a good idea to marry somebody from another culture. But of course, at 24, what do you know?
No, but it's a possibility. And sometimes it's the reason that my husband and I didn't have kids is because of genetics. We looked at our health history and our family health history and said, no, I'm not putting somebody else at risk to pick up our problems. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
We
mean,
don't have grandkids, and I often think, well, the way the world is going, maybe it's just as well. I mean, I would love grandkids, but neither of our boys have been have had kids. So, I think a lot of people are making that choice these days.
that was the other reason I told my mom at 17 I was either going to adopt or have stepkids. I wasn't going to have kids. And
Mhm.
then getting married the second time, it was kind of like, well, I don't, the genetics of both of us, no. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Well,
it's a smarter choice, but
Antonio's biological father never married, and I think it's in the second book. He passed away, and I have a chapter on what happened when he passed away. They never did meet. I mean, we lived in his biological son lived in California. He lived in Ohio. Never the two made any
wow.
effort to get together, which I found really preposterous. I mean, I grew up in a quite close, caring family, and I couldn't imagine that if you had a child, you wouldn't want to be involved in their life somehow. But
So,
it
some
happened.
people, I mean, it's interesting because for some people, family is everything, and other people, it's kind of like, well, I think it's just a matter of if you look at it from the standpoint that the father never took interest, how are you supposed to, as a kid,
Yeah,
raise
well,
him?
luckily, Antonio had a very caring grandfather. Now, the grandfather passed away when he was 18. Antonio was born, his birth certificate says Machu Picchu, which is the big ruins there that everybody
Hmm.
goes to see.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out he hadn't actually been to the top of the mountain, but there is they had a hacienda down below the mountain, and it was called Machu Picchu. And thank heavens he did have a grandfather that cared about him. Actually, when he came to the United States, my father taught him a lot about fixing things, and my father was kind of a substitute. And of all my sisters, let's see, half I have six siblings, and half of them had very bad divorces, and half of us have two of us have stayed married. Three of us, my youngest one. My youngest brother lives in Mexico and is married to a lovely Mexican woman, and he's a professor at the University of Veracruz in Jalapa down there. And
But
so I think there's something about the Latin culture and my family that
sounds like
attract.
it.
Yeah.
Uh, but the one thing you were, since you were talking about your family, half stayed married, half didn't. The thing is, our culture has changed so much since the '60s. I mean, I I'll date myself. I was born at the end of the '60s, so I was a kid. I'm a kid of divorce in the '70s, the late '70s. So divorce at that point started to pick up. You had Ms. Magazine, you had the oh, I want to say the gay divorcee. I think it was, if you were a divorcee, divorced, you were the hot trot woman and everything else. But that was all these little stereotypes, and I don't think kids at that point knew how to deal with that kind of stuff
Well, I think they
or
still have a
anybody.
hard time
No,
dealing with it if you read any of the literature on it. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it seemed like with women's lib was just coming in, and it seemed like women thought that's how the best way to be liberated is to get divorced. I mean, I don't want to make light of their decisions, but in my second book, there were many instances where our marriage looked like it would not endure. And partly I think it was the example. My parents, before they passed away, had been married 66 years, I think. And so there's the example. But if things don't work out, they don't work out. I mean, you don't want people to stay in a miserable marriage. But my husband, when we came up here, didn't have a college education. He hadn't finished his college, and even the college he had finished, he went to UC Berkeley. They never accepted any of the credits that he had
yeah.
earned for 3 years, in Peru. I guess they didn't feel that he had learned much of anything, and he changed his major anyway. So, um, but anyway, so I had to support the family for many years. And I think, and this was in the early 70s when that was very unlikely. I mean, most women did
Right.
not work outside the home once you had children. But again, I just looked at things logically, and I thought, well, I've got a good education, and I like working. And so it was not easy, but somehow I got through it. But I think there were a lot of women who would not have put up with a lot.
Well, and here's the thing. I think, for you got to go outside the house. For somebody like my mom, and I mean, looking back at the time, my mom always swore, well, I met your dad. My dad and her grew up around each other. Same thing with my godfather. And, she was like, I was so in love with your dad. And yes, she raised me, don't, if someone says they love you, then prove it. Don't, all that. It's kind of what she went through. But she would tell me how my dad was her knight in shining armor coming in to whisk her away. And then he turned out to be on a jackass and his armor was rusted. However, but here's the thing. So after she's gone, my dad's mom one day my dad's mom was a pistol. She would tell you and play games with people all the time. But she says, well, your mom just wanted out the house. Okay, whatever. I just kind of ignored her. And so as I'm writing for a second, I start thinking about it. It's like, well, wait a second. If my mom said he was the knight in shining armor coming to whisk her away, that means she did want out the house. She was 17. She was 17 years old when she and my dad decided to get married. So she wanted that. Not that, I mean, she wasn't pregnant.
Thought that's what she wanted.
Yeah, that's exactly it. She thought that's what she wanted. My dad emancipated himself so they could get married.
Oh.
Which I didn't find out until I was 40 years old, and my uncle let it slip, and I'm like, what? So my dad actually emancipated himself to get married. And it wasn't that, I mean, I didn't come around for another year after they got married, but it was interesting looking at that dynamic because my mom, obviously, she was not mature enough. You were older when you made all these choices. My mom wasn't. She was 1 year away from becoming a dance teacher, and she had some mental health issues. So she took this opportunity to latch on and get out. And I don't think she ever found that strength. When I started my Catholic high school, my freshman year, we had to, for freshman orientation, our parents had to write us a letter. And my mom wrote me the letter, and the gist of it, one statement in there that still rings true. She's like, I may not be the mother you want me to be, but I'm guaranteeing you're going to be a strong woman. And that's what I want for you.
Oh.
So, sometimes our parents can't be the parents we want them to be, but those lessons they teach us make us who we are.
Yes. No, that's so true. Well, and my parents always warned me against sex, period. They never said it could be enjoyable, anything positive about it, just, stay away from it. And, I mean, it really prejudices you and really interferes with your mind to learn those things over and over again. I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, the guilt they lay out for, and not that we were going to turn this into a sex talk, but the guilt they lay on you, your parents are older than mine, but even the fact that my mom's like, well, if a guy says, if you love me, prove it, right then and there, that if you were to do something, then all that guilt's attached. Now, the caveat here is both my parents, after they divorced, live with somebody. And when I was in high school, I said to myself, I'm like, all right, so if I decide when I meet somebody, if I decide I'm going to live with them, neither one of them can say a damn thing because...
Well, maybe they say, like my father used to say, don't do as I do, do as I say.
They tried that. That didn't work with me. Did not work with me at all. It was just kind of like, no, you guys did it. So sorry. So, I mean, we see what our parents do and we can choose to be like them or we can choose to change.
Well, and if we're wise, we pick some things that will be good for us and other things that aren't so good for us.
Exactly.
From them. Yeah.
I mean, you have, and that's the other thing, you have to break the cycle. If there's something in your family that is not healthy and it's toxic, you have to break that cycle. It's up to you. You can't just say, oh, it's all going to go magically well. No, and you have to work at it. So,
or get a lot of therapy. My youngest son doesn't stop telling me how beneficial it would be if I had more therapy. I have had some therapy, but he has had a lot more than I have. So, of course, he knows better than I do.
I swear by therapists. I think therapists are a wonderful thing, and they can help you see things in a different thing. Yeah.
No, absolutely, I agree. Agreed. Yeah.
So since we've talked about you have all these spoilers, so I can't really go a lot of places. So you have two sons now, correct?
Right. And
And how soon after did the second son come along?
well, my
Or is this a
husband,
spoiler?
no, actually, the second book goes into my husband had wanted a second child. If we had a second child, first of all, he was very much aware and believed that the world was becoming overpopulated, and was aware of environmental damage before anybody else, it seems like. Or at least he said, we didn't really need to have another child. But I came from a family of 6 kids, and I didn't want my son to be an only child. And I was working, and he was still in school. And so I just kind of announced that I was, by then I knew about birth control. And even though it was against church's policy, I think it still is, I was taking birth control. And I just said, I'm going off birth control, and you can do whatever you want. And he hadn't done anything for me not to get pregnant for the first one, so I didn't think he'd do anything for the second one. But he wanted any child second, if we had a second child, them to be born in Peru, because he really has that connection to his home country. And a lot of immigrants do. I mean, they just yearn for the soil that they came from. And even though it's not the same, when they go back, they're different and the country is different. And so we had a second child. And when in writing the second book, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm still the same headstrong, determined person that I was when I was in the Peace Corps. But that's what's gotten me through. And that's, I guess, why my son thinks I should get more therapy, but too late. I mean, I probably will, but anyway, we've weathered it through. So no, there's 4.5 years between the two boys. So, and they live on different sides of the country. One lives in Los Angeles and the other one lives in New York. So,
but you should be proud of your strength. I mean, a strong woman is something to be proud of. Being a strong woman is something to be proud of. From your credentials, you've had an amazing career, and you're writing now. So it's like you're on your second act, third act at this point. You're still thriving in your life, and that's important. And I think, I've talked about this before on the show that, because I read cards and stuff, and I have had clients that tell me, well, my husband handles everything. And I got to admit that when I was married the first time and I was taking care of my husband's kids, I was a stay-at-home mom. And it was rewarding to a certain point, but then I got bored because I needed an outlet to do something in my life.
Your mind needed some challenge.
Yeah. So I left into being a disc jockey, and I was writing, but I never took it seriously enough to publish anything at that point. But deciding to move past that and get out of the situation and take control, and it was very empowering. And when my husband passed, my second husband passed, I had control of our life. I knew what was financially happening. I knew everything that I needed to know. And there's so many women still nowadays that just I have no clue. I don't know. Okay, so and I try to explain that all it takes is one wrong turn in a car. Somebody blows a stop sign, and because I used to work in insurance, and I've seen it. And one wrong move, and your spouse is gone. How are you going to deal with that? And they have no answer. And it always just amazes me is how I'm not saying that women need to just be like, oh well, I'm going to be no, but there should be a balance in a relationship, and you should.
Now that you mention it, I think my mother probably was a good model for that. Not that I did it because of that, but she did not work when she was raising her first 5 kids. But when we moved to California and there was work, then she did start working, and then we all chipped in and helped take care of the boy that was born, the last one, the caboose kid. And I think she enjoyed working more than trying to figure out meals and cleaning and all of that for her kids. Although she still espoused that, she still would say, Evelyn, you really should be staying home with your kids. in college, so my psychology teacher, very well known in the San Francisco Bay Area, used to lecture us all the time. Now, when you have children, you really can't work. You really, those kids need you. My kids have turned out just fine, and I worked from the time they were born practically. So,
Go ahead.
yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, you just have to figure things out.
Right. And I mean, I think the only reason I chose to stay home with my stepdaughters at the time was because they had gone through so much that
Oh,
it was
yeah.
like it was better for me to be there. But
Yeah.
I don't think a woman working when she has kids is a bad thing. It gives her a sense of purpose
Yeah.
besides being a mom, because being a mom shouldn't be just being a mom, it should be being a parent, and both parents should play a role.
Well, and I think having done so many different things and the life I've lived, and even write, and especially writing, I've gotten to know and feel comfortable and okay with who I am and where I've been and how I got there. Whereas my husband seems a little bit unfulfilled still. It might be because he longs to go back to Peru. I mean, he says he does, and he does go back for long periods of time, and we have a house there. Uh, I guess in the second book you'll find out how he managed to buy a house in Peru, and he's done remodeling of it and everything. But I either men are this way or it's just him that he doesn't sound like he's as fulfilled as I feel I am, and I think I am because I've raised kids, I've done so many different things and used my talents.
Yeah.
I've gotten to know what talents I have and use them and feel satisfied.
I
And
I think that's a if you can figure out what your passions are and what your talents are, and you can do something with them, even if it's just an attempt to do something, you 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 fulfill yourself. I was terrified at one point of being a mom, and being the stepmom to those two kids gave me a great gift.
mhm.
Cams.
Yeah.
um
And now you have to stay financially solvent the whole time you're doing this. I mean,
yeah.
I believe in people doing what they enjoy doing and what they're meant to do. And yeah, you're right, finding the passion. But sometimes you don't know till you try it. I mean, you have
Right.
to risk. I mean, that's one of the things I think in both my books that I took a lot of risks and in my mind, they turned out just fine. And, and following your heart, I think, you need to follow your heart. I think there are a lot of people that take an expedient way out. My son, my youngest son, just recently went through a divorce, and I took a look at a lot of marriages that I know, and sometimes it's not good to marry your best friend because you're so familiar, and whereas like with me, it was a big risk, and it was something new and exciting, and it still is. So, taking the easy way out for me would have been boring, I think. So
I married my best friend the second time, and
oh,
it was
okay.
great. No, but I mean that doesn't always work. You can marry
Yeah,
your
no,
best friend and it doesn't always work, and then you can marry,
well, I think it depends on what age you are when you do
yeah,
it. You
yeah,
were older, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was in my late 40s, so
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. You
yeah.
knew you knew your
I knew myself enough, and I knew what to expect.
mhm.
So the first marriage, I was young. I was in my 20s, and, terrified of being a mom and terrified of being alone. So I was like, okay, well, here we go. Let's go. Insta family.
Yeah.
And, I mean, if I could go back and do it again, I'm not sure I would have, but it made me who I
Some
am.
some therapists say you shouldn't marry until you're 30 just because it takes your 20s to know who you are and what you want. And I figure I skipped a few of those stages because I was out on my own so early. And I happened to I think my instincts were good as to who I married. I mean, there were times when I thought, "Oh gosh, what have I gotten myself into?" But in the long run, it's been very satisfying. So,
The funny thing you mentioned is because the very first date I had with my first husband, I sat there at the dinner table. I think I was 22. And I sat there saying I did not want to fall in love until I was 25. And I did not want to get married and have kids until I was 30.
oh.
Yeah.
On the other hand, your biology, I've read articles that say you're better off having your kids before you're 28 or something like that. And
Yeah.
but that doesn't happen as much anymore. I think people are more mature now when they decide to have kids.
They're more mature. They want to be financially stable. They want to be in they want to have some fun. And I think that's part of the reason why my parents failed, was because they got married young and they didn't have that time to explore their lives. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about the first book. So Between the Inca Walls, tell me about that a little bit.
Well, like I said, it's a coming of age story. It goes into my childhood growing up in Montana, and I can see where my life in Montana prepared me for doing many of the other things that I did. I mean, I was used to not having a telephone, for example, and in our first house, we didn't even have running water. So by the time I volunteered in Mexico and then in Peru, it didn't faze me not to have running water in the house and things like that. And some people remark in the book, they'll read in the book where we were just delighted, Marie and I were, to get this 12 by 14 inch room. It was a former storage room that the education department cleared out so we could live there. And we were just delighted. It had a concrete floor and a tin roof, and we thought we'd hit the jackpot. And really, compared to some volunteers, it was. And then it was free. I mean, they didn't charge us rent. And everybody else had to pay rent. So all along the way, and it was exciting. It was an adventure, and I loved adventures. And then meeting someone and for a year I was falling in love, so that made it interesting, exciting, and I learned a lot. There are a lot of chapters in Between Inca Walls about going to meetings of indigenous people in the countryside, and they would work for a big hacienda owner who, like, they might plant and harvest the potatoes, and then they would get part of the harvest, and then a big bulk would go to the owner of the land. And there's an incident in there, it's called the potato caper, where actually it's won prizes, that particular chapter, in our California Writers Club put it in their magazine. And it gives a picture of how the different classes of people see one another, how the indigenous are, and there's still that difference in a lot of countries, including in our country, between the upper class and the lower class. And so there's a lot of geography in there. It actually, interestingly enough, was #1 on Amazon in Peru travel, and it's still pretty high up there. It's like 27 the last time I checked. It stayed up there because of the descriptions that I give about Peru and going to Machu Picchu for the first time. I've been there 3 times now. And a lot of people, I've really been pleasantly surprised at what people identify with. I mean, it's my life, but there are a lot of universal themes in it that people seem to pick up that I didn't even know were necessarily there. For people in Montana, I write that the expectation when I was 16, which is the age we moved to California, was that girls would get a horse and a husband in that order. And I wasn't a big horse rider. I did know how to ride horses, but I just didn't quite fit into the atmosphere there. And my parents, because they moved me when I was a senior in high school, and I moved from a class of 28 to a class of 400, I think, or 600. It was huge. And they were very concerned how I would adjust. If they would have asked me, I would have told them, I'm all for, a new adventure and new horizons. Now, I think it did affect my youngest, one of my brothers. I have 2 brothers, or I had 2 brothers. My brother, who was about 10 or 11 when he moved here, it had a bigger effect on him than it did on me. And that I cover in my second book, like I said. And now I think I'm done writing about that part of my life, and I'm going to start writing about my travels, because they're exciting too. Yeah.
Nice. I was going to tell you, it's nice to hear somebody else say that, you took what you learned from one part of your life and you saw how it could benefit you in another. A lot of people are so blind to seeing that, I was like, for me, I was a step kid, so I learned how to be a step parent because I
Wow.
saw how they acted and I knew what I didn't want to do. So I think a lot of people don't look at life that way. So it was refreshing to hear you say that. So your next book comes out in September 21st. Do you actually have a release date, or is it just a general?
Yeah, September 28th it comes out. Yeah, and I'll be having some book launches, and I don't know if I'll do as much for that as I did for the first one. But yeah, the first one's been well received, won a number of prizes, and what's most gratifying is that all the people who know me or who contact me, actually, there are a lot of people that find me just through the book and tell me their experiences or say how much they identify with certain things, or I think it gives them impetus to maybe take more risks in their lives, and teach us something about another country that they wouldn't know. I mean, it is kind of like taking a trip to Peru if you've never been there. So
are your travel books going to be kind of like that, or are they going to be fiction based, or is it strictly like a travel book?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting a lot of advice. I just put it out there. What would you read?
Mm-hmm.
What do you like to read about travel? Now, whenever I travel, I try to get a book about the place. It can be fiction, it can be nonfiction. Usually it's a fiction book or a memoir of some kind. And that lets me immerse myself in the country that I'm going to. And then I'll read it while I'm there, and I can actually see the places that they're talking about. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It could be fiction, but since I want to cover a lot of different countries, um, and there are things that happen in every country, but they're different. And so it might be a series of essays.
Short
I'm
stories.
gonna take a look at, someone just recommended best travel stories, best women's travel stories. And I'm going to take a look and get that and see what kind of travel stories people like to read.
Well, I'm sure
So
you'll have an amazing following because I'm sure you get some interesting stories. 100 countries, that's a lot of stories.
yeah, and I'm still traveling. I mean, there are a few that I haven't been to. And my husband, what turned out in the beginning, throughout most of my second book, Love in Any Language, my husband is reluctant to travel. And then at the time that we retired, he's the one that wants to go a lot more than I do now. So that's been gratifying. So we'll see. We'll
Well,
see.
I wish you great travels and I wish you much success on your next book. And I
Thank
thank you
you.
for sharing your story with me. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah,
So
thank you
thank
for the
you.
interview. Good luck
No
to you.
problem. Thank you.